think now you can hear me, right?
Now I can hear you.
Great.
Hello, Father. How are you today?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for saying yes to this interview. I think it's going to be great for the collection.
You're welcome. Wait till you see the bill.
See the what?
See the bill.
Oh, okay. I'll have it sent to my professor.
You're right.
So, just as a heads up, this is recording, and it will be sent to the archives, and it will also be sent to a national archive that is working on um, collecting stuff globally. So that'll be neat
Okay.
as a representation for Eau Claire.
Okay.
So, you ready to get started?
I am.
Okay. So first of all, what is today's date and time?
So we are, what is it, May 8th today? Friday, May 8th, and I think we're a little after 10 o'clock, 10:03 in the morning.
Yep. So not first of all, sorry, little jittery, nervous. First, can you tell me your name and can you spell it for me?
Sure. Reverend Brian J. Jazdzewski. Reverend would be common spelling. Brian would be Brian, middle initial J, Jazdzewski, Jadzewski.
Okay. And what would you like to be referred to as? By
Father is fine.
Father. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And
For
I'm
the
Aaron.
interview's sake, that's fine.
Okay. I'm Aaron. Joel is my stepdad. He's letting me use this account. It's nice to meet you. So, what are the primary things you do on a normal day-to-day basis?
So normally day to day, there's I provide spiritual services for people daily, sometimes twice a day. And then there's any series of organizational and administrative meetings for running the church, as well as some meetings involved in the Catholic school system in Eau Claire. And I also do some individual kind of counsel and advice and guidance for people, and not necessarily daily, but regularly, as well as then helping families who are experiencing new life by way of baptism and everything in between baptisms, new life, as well as the end of life, and dealing with families that are attending to funerals and the loss of a loved one. And then also a series of visits to people who are homebound, nursing homes, the aging, as well as sometimes sick calls to people in the hospital, oftentimes very serious health concerns or end of life issues. And I think that would summarize most of the day-to-day stuff.
Sure. And I think I should also ask, what is your job position?
Sure. So currently I'm a pastor of one Catholic parish in Eau Claire. It's two Catholic buildings, churches, but one as organization.
Okay. So where do you live and what is it like to live there?
All right. So currently living in Eau Claire, and the current address is on Dewey Street. I don't think I know exactly which hill they call it. I've only been here just a year and a half, 2 years. And what was the other part of that question?
What is it like to live there?
Yeah, so I've been enjoying Eau Claire because I think the people are good. I think there's plenty of opportunities for support for getting along by way of store options and restaurant options and entertainment options, as well as healthcare options. So it's all those things that I like right now as far as living in any community, including Eau Claire.
Sure. When you first learned about COVID, what were your thoughts about it?
First thoughts would have been a little bit surprised and shocking, and probably early on didn't think it was going to affect us. But then as things were getting a little more limited and regulated and governed, it was really just a question of searching for what is the truth in this pandemic. Not so much the truth about the regulations, but the truth about how serious is it, and how bad is it, and how contagious is it. And so it's just those questions about what is the truth of it all, because there is all kinds of kind of conflicting information on all kinds of levels and degrees of seriousness. And it was just and still is, I think, but was and still is just difficult to find the truth in it all.
Sure. How have your thoughts changed since then?
So I would suppose that when um, there was an understanding of how some people were seriously ill and how contagious COVID-19 is, I think understood a little bit more reasonably the choices and the regulations to take precautions. And so I think at this point, probably just holding in that attitude about the pandemic.
Sure. What issues have most concerned you about the COVID pandemic?
Okay. I read these questions several times before.
That's okay.
Yeah. I think that the would be the people who are considered essential and the risk that they're taking for the sake of helping us continue to get along as culture. And I think not only so much the concern for people who are caring for others, but then also those who are suffering from the disease. And maybe the third thing that's most concerning is the economical impact, not only at the present moment, but into the future, and the future we know not how long.
Has COVID-19 affected your job? If so, in what ways?
My job or my kind of daily responsibilities have diminished significantly because of church. We are operating because people can come to us and gather in large groups. And because that's not happening currently, things have slowed down a lot. And the other piece that has been interesting and I think educational for the future for me as well as my work is that some of our meetings have continued to take place in video conferencing, and have just found that a continued way to connect to people and to continue progressing forward, because the life of the church doesn't stop because people aren't coming here, but just being more creative in communication with the meeting and the operational administrative reality, but also the communicating that we've done with the members of our church primarily by way of regular mailing, because our congregation is predominantly older, which means many of them don't have access to the digital communication. So we've been very aggressive in sending out mailings to our people. And by that, I mean, typically we probably send out a mailing maybe every 3 or 4 months. And in this pandemic, we've been doing a mailing every 7 to 10 days, just to keep people informed about what continues to happen at the church.
Okay. Has COVID-19 changed your employment status?
Not mine. And I will add that the employment status of our employees that are regular employees has been able to sustain, because our church was a recipient of the payroll protection program from the federal government. So we were able to keep our employees on, and some of them are working in-house and some of them are working remotely, so that we can continue to do ministry. So mine hasn't changed, but I think that what has changed is the fact that the support staff and those in the parish are still able to help us with ministry.
What concerns do you have about the effects of COVID on your employment and the economy more broadly?
Sure, I think that because we're a nonprofit and we survive on the generosity of people, I don't know that anything will affect me too much personally, but I think as far as the work of what our church does, I think there's the potential for some of that to be strained in the future, because some of our congregation were laid off and or furloughed, and therefore their household income is lower, and therefore it may reduce what they're able to give to our congregation. We have to say that we've rejoiced a bit in our last mailing, because in April we had our second highest offertory income for the fiscal year. The other
Wow.
month higher than that was December. And what was fascinating about April being our second highest month of income, yes, Easter was in there, but we weren't gathered together as people, as congregations. So our church members have continued to support very well in this absence by continuing to mail in their contributions or to provide online giving for us. And that has been a real testament, I think, to their faith and support of what we do. And consequently, in the present moment, we don't see where we have to make too many cuts, but certainly be careful about what we do now and in the future.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah. Uh, has the COVID pandemic affected the employment of the people you know? In what ways? You kind of mentioned this already.
Right. There have been some of the members of the congregation who have mentioned to me that they've been laid off or furloughed. It seems that their attitude is a little bit welcome to that because they've enjoyed the time then to be at home and catch up with their family and to catch up with household projects and have, at least to this point, had themselves in a financial position where they were stable enough that being furloughed or laid off hasn't created a lot of devastation for them. So um, I think that to those who have been able to share with me the reality of being laid off or furloughed, it's been welcomed. I don't know if they want to do it every year, but it's been welcomed into their lives.
Okay. How has the COVID-19 outbreak affected your community?
It would seem that people in the community have had to adjust to the limitations about recreational activities and even daily life activities. And some of the conversation that's been interesting is people's um, telephone or email conversations or some of our video chats about their adjustments going to the grocery store. First it was this, and then it was this, and then it was this, and adjusting to those things with a sense of reception because it is, I believe, in their hearts trying to do what is best for the community. And I would think the same for other shopping. You know, various places are increasing regulations. And I think that it seems people are also somewhat enthusiastic about supporting the restaurants that are able to do carryouts or deliveries because they do understand the kind of the small business support. And I think that right now it seems that from some of my conferences with folks that there's been a little bit of itchiness about getting some things back together in groups because our community hasn't been deeply impacted by COVID-19. So it's kind of like, well, the frustration, let's just get back together again. But I think also understanding that there's still some precautions because we just have a lot of unknowns and really don't want ourselves to be a community that has to deal with a serious pandemic in a high and escalated way.
How are people around you responding to the COVID pandemic?
So that's transitioned a bit. Initially, people were, I think, skeptical, and then there was kind of the sort of the gloom and doom commentary about this or that bad thing happening here, there, everywhere. And then there's been sort of the political commentary about this or that party trying to do this or that control. And I think at this point, people have kind of come to a place where they understand the seriousness. And while they may not be in agreement of how things are starting to reopen and get back to ordinary, they realize a sense of lack of control in it at this point and are just kind of succumbing to this sense of this is the way it's going to be and we have to weather through it and we weather through it together and as a community. So I think that there's kind of, it's been sort of some waves of people's responses and reactions to pandemic.
Have you seen people around you change their opinions, day-to-day activities, or relationships in response to the pandemic?
I think that some of that would have been kind of responded to in that previous
Yeah.
response, and I also think that my sense here, as the weather has warmed up for us in our area, as people are getting more and more antsy, and I think starting to sort of press the gathering reality and press the going out reality, just and kind of pushing the boundaries on that because you know, it's, I think, some of the American attitude, nobody can tell me not to, and so I think some of that rebellion or that kind of resistance seems to start to show a little bit more.
Self-isolation and flattening the curve have been two key ideas that have emerged during the pandemic. How have you, your family, friends, community responded to the request to self-isolate and flatten the curve?
Sure, I think that those who I know have participated pretty well in flattening the curve by quarantining or staying at home and reducing their exposure to people and then just kind of taking the precautions with cleaning things along the way, just because there is a lot of uncertainty. So I would say that by and large, my family and friends have and people that I know have been pretty submissive to the regulations, for the sake of trying to really do what we can for the sake of others.
I have a question that wasn't on this list that is just coming up now. If you're not
Sure.
comfortable answering it, that's totally okay. But through this pandemic, we've noticed like southern states, some churches down in the South have been really pushing back against the stay-at-home order. Have you seen any of that in Eau Claire or with your parish? Anyone really pushing back and hard?
In this parish, I would say no. There's been pressure from a few people, and by a few people, I would say maybe 4 or 5 that in the course of a couple of weeks kind of really desire to get back to some group gatherings. And I think in the midst of that desire, they also understand not only the practical reality of, well, let's just get back together, but I think also understand the moral issue that as church, our part is to bring people to God, but also as church, our part is to do what we can to support the common good. So I think that morally we understand that, as people in my congregation, that while getting together may work out and we can take all kinds of precautions and make that happen, it's hard for us to be sensitive to people who are on the front lines and are concerned for them. Meanwhile, being those who host a service where people could gather together and contract the disease. And it's just hard to kind of live on both sides of that. And so I think the moral issue of let's truly protect the common good, so let's not gather together, seems to be what prevails, even though the policy is challenged a bit. And so that I think is kind of how the people of my parish have been responding at this point.
We're going off script again because I just have this conversation with you has been bringing up more questions that really aren't fitting with this. So you mentioned that you're trying live streams, correct?
Uh-huh.
So the
Well, I guess
sermons.
let me clarify
Oh yeah.
well, we aren't doing live stream service. What we are doing is when we're having some of our council meetings, we're doing so through video conference.
Okay. Okay. So have you released any like sermons for congregation members?
So what I've been doing for communication, mentioned the mailings, the letters
Mhm.
earlier. Pretty much daily, I put out a little thought on our app, our parish app, and we have been doing a few other video recorded prayer services that are brief and linking those to our website. And then through our Facebook page as well as through our app, we're directing people to those pre-recorded prayer services. And again, they're brief, but we want to at least try to communicate the message of faith in the midst of this. The other great thing that has happened in our church not our local church, but in Catholicism in the country and the world prior to this, is that there's been any number of really good digital communicators. And so we've just kind of tried to channel the people who have more hunger to those resources and to try to satisfy those needs, because we knew that our parish, based on the older population, wouldn't reach a bunch of people, but also knew that for us, there would be a pretty large startup to get to a point where live streaming or digital recording would not only reach a lot of households, but also a lot of input and resources to make that happen. So we just chose to take a more subtle approach, and maybe some might say a more conventional or traditional or old-fashioned approach, but understanding that's where our congregation is, that's the choices that we've made to try to continue to reach some, but do so in a way that we believe that is the most effective with our time and resources.
So has the content you've been releasing really been COVID centered?
In my own content, have been trying to evade that a little bit and just keep people concentrating on a message of hope and a message of rejoicing in what we have before us. that doesn't mean that I try to avoid the COVID reality, but I do touch on it sometimes, like in the stuff we've pre-recorded. We do touch on it a little bit, acknowledging the fact that we are at lockdown, but also acknowledging the fact that our relationship with God and one another doesn't stop because of that.
Okay. And Easter just happened, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah. And we were in lockdown for it. What was that experience like? Yeah. What,
You're
sorry.
doing great. You're doing great off script. So for us, for Easter, we were given permission to meet in groups that would be under the limit of 9 or less people. So what we did is we had some services during Holy Week, which for us would have started on Palm Sunday and ended on Easter Sunday. We did have some small group gatherings periodically through Holy Week to try to get some people together and pray so that I wouldn't have to be praying in private. And I think that the people who were able to were very grateful for that opportunity to be in prayer. So while it was different, it was still a praying. My role as the pastor is not just to pray for me and those who are before me, but really to pray for the people in the congregation and really people around the world. So it just helped me to remember that my prayer goes beyond just for those who are gathered there.
Okay. Going back to the script now. Has
Well, that was
COVID
more fun.
good. I'll see if I have any more of those later on. Has COVID changed your relationships with family, friends, or community? If so, in what ways?
I think that with family, I would say things are pretty much stable. Um, Friends, I would say, is pretty good too, because my lifestyle is such that I don't have a lot of free time where I gather together with friends on a regular basis. So that has been pretty stable, connecting just by way of text messaging or emails and some phone calls. With the community, I would say that there is much more of a stretch there because in our parish, we're used to on a weekend having around 500 people come through our doors. And now for the last, whatever it's been, 7, 8 weeks, we've been, used to very few. We still have our church open for a couple hours on the weekend for people to come and pray. And some of those people do chat with me before and after they come to pray. But um, so just I think with the community, it's just been sort of that distance and just kind of that wonder about how people are, and in some ways missing them, missing their presence, and seeing them assemble together to pray.
Have you or anybody you know gotten sick during the outbreak?
Not me, and no one that I know.
Okay. In what ways do you think that COVID is affecting people's mental and or physical health?
From what I'm hearing from my people that we've been in video conference with, that I think their mental health in some ways has been good because they've acknowledged the sense about how busy their lives were, and just have found this time to sort of reprioritize what's important to them, spending time with their family and being at home, and just kind of allowed their minds really to be at rest. And I think physically, I think that some people have found themselves to be able to be recreating more, exercising more, and maybe even just their household or yard chores has found that to be better for them. So that's probably most of the people that I've talked to. And I will also say that we do, again, having this congregation that is a little bit older. We have 90 people in the parish who are over the age of 80. And in the parish, I suppose we might have 1,500 people. So 90 of them are over the age of 80. And we do have some of our parishioners who are calling those people regularly. They've each taken a small group and are calling those households weekly on a weekly basis just to catch up. And so are people who are aging, and some of them in the nursing homes that I've been able to call are finding the loneliness and the disconnection from family and the misunderstanding of, well, why can't my grandchildren just come and visit me? And so I think that that the more challenged side of the pandemic is the aging population. While they don't want to get sick, there's the misunderstanding, and I think that's where the loneliness and the separation is really causing some agony in their minds and hearts.
So when the COVID restrictions are lifted and things start to go back to normal, do you see a big lasting impact staying with your parish? Do you think there's going to be changes that we have now that are going to stick, or do you think it's going to go relatively back to the way it was?
In our monthly mailing, what I have done is, I should say monthly mailing, in the mailing I've been doing every 7 to 10 days, I've been encouraging the people the fact that I don't want to go back to normal. Because our normalcy was just a lot of kind of coasting in the congregation. And my encouragement is that we sort of reignite a sense of volunteerism and a sense of community and a sense of care and concern for one another, that this absence of gathering creates a more of a hunger and appreciation for being able to be together, and just to not only nurture community, but also to nurture what they can do for the church and for one another. And I think along those lines is also a sense about how much our faith and our prayer and our reception of the sacraments means for us as Catholics, and in the aching in their hearts to receive communion, which for us is a big deal, that there's more of an appreciation and a deepened sense about who it is that we receive in communion, our Lord Himself. And so there's a sense in me that the normal would be to just kind of show up and go through the motions of church. And my encouragement to the congregation is I don't want normal. I want a deepening hunger and appreciation for communion, as well as that reawakening of our community with one another, and that deepening sense about how we can continue to volunteer for our church.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, has your experience transformed how you think about your family, friends, and community?
I would suppose that the biggest thing is just really the admiration of people, not only in community, but really I would say nationally and even globally, about how, for the most part, at least from what we're hearing, is that people are keeping their heads. You know, there was a little bit of a passing fear for a number of days where we remembered that it was on the news that people were going out and buying all kinds of firearms and ammunition. While while I'm not adamantly opposed to firearms and ammunition, I'm like, oh my gosh, are people really going to be taking up arms in order to get a roll of toilet paper from one another? And so I would say that so far, from what we've been hearing, people have kept their heads, and that just really helps me to admire the goodness of people in it all, is that we haven't turned to a tremendous sense of violence for our own survival, is that we just have understood we're in this together, let's weather this together, and we're going to come out better on the other side. So I would say that that would be maybe how my perspective of people has changed.
Okay. Knowing what you know now, what do you think that individuals, communities, or governments need to keep in mind for the future?
Wow.
I know.
I don't know if I have a good answer for that,
That's okay.
honestly. I think that the one aspect, and it may come up again in one of the later questions about the impacts, is what to keep in mind for the future is this is our plan for now, and while it's good to hold things back, and it's good for people to be laid off, and good for some small businesses to be closed, and good for the federal government to support with a lot of funding. I think it's just that question about, well, how is the rebound from this, and how do we get back to some stability on all of those levels. I just think that that's part of it, and I also think that what was difficult early on was when the restrictions were coming and not knowing when we will come out of them. And I think even to this day that I think there is still some suspicion about when will we come out of this, as far as the gatherings of people again. Because we've been hearing various dates tossed around, but then other variables that go around those dates. I think that some of us are saying just tell us. If we're going to go down to 9 people, just tell us that and let's get there. And if we're going to be on lockdown until July 10th, then just tell us that and we'll survive with that and deal with that. And I just think that, in the future, a clear plan is better, even if it's, July 10th and all of a sudden we can get back together on June 10th, well, then we can rejoice. And so I think it's just some of those, kind of a hunger in me. Just be clear. Just what does this mean? Where are we going? And give us the answers and let us just live within the parameters.
Okay. Well, that's the last question I have. Is there anything
Okay.
else we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
There wasn't anything else that particularly came to mind. I think my points that I had after looking at the reflection questions were had come out in the interview. So I think
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with what I've shared here.
Okay, me too. I think this is great. Thank you so much for these responses.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
we will end up putting it on our COVID-19 website. I can email you a link to that if you're interested, along with
I
like a
would do
news
that.
article on it. Yeah, it's a neat little thing. We're accepting submissions from people in the Eau Claire Valley of how they are living in quarantine. And part of this is oral histories that will hopefully be used in the future for future researchers. It's, I think, really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is
Okay.
interesting to be asked to be part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's about it for our interview. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's good
Yeah.
to chat with you today.
Yeah. Stay safe, and I hope this all ends soon.
Sounds good. Stay well.
You too.
Bye
Bye.
bye.